I mean, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback and go back and criticize. But moving on to the relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. I mean, the definitely administration made quotes. Evidence from intelligence sources and statements by people now in custody reveal that Saddam Hussein aids protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Cheney said, I think there's overwhelming evidence that there was a connection between Al-Qaeda and the Iraqi government.
Again, he's quoting George
Tenet.
Tenet.
Well, okay. I mean, George Tenet, I'm not suggesting that George Tenet was misleading the people when he claimed that Cheney's assertions went well beyond his agency's assertions. But I just wanted to ask you about the Office of Special Plans, which was the Pentagon unit that you ran, created by you and Paul Wolfowitz. I just wanted to operate. I know the group, I don't know if this is true, you can tell me if it's not, was said to provide raw intelligence unvetted by the CIA. So operationally, what did this group do?
The Office of Special Plans, which is now called the Office of Northern Gulf Affairs, was simply one of the geographic offices within the policy organization. There was nothing unusual about it. What happened was, it's hard for a lot of people to believe, but in the summer of 2002, the total number of people in the policy organization that were working full-time on Iraq was 2 people. I don't know if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
And we went and got permission to hire something like 16 or 18 additional people to handle the enormous workload in the Pentagon Policy Organization regarding Iraq in the weeks running up to the president's speech. The first presidential speech on Iraq was at the UN in September of 2002. And so the government was working like crazy on Iraq issues. A lot of them were things that we were asked to support in the Pentagon. And as I said, we only had 2 people who were full-time on the subject. So we went and got permission to hire, as I said, another 16 or 18 people. I don't remember the exact number. And when that got done, the Near East and South Asia Affairs Office decided to set up divisions within the office. It didn't have them before. And the division for Northern Gulf Affairs was called the Office of Special Plans. And the reason it was given an obscure name like that, rather than the geographic description, was people at the White House were saying the president is about to give a speech at the UN focusing on Iraq. People are going to say he's already made the decision to go to war. He hasn't. And the White House said we don't want anybody suggesting through anything that they do that the president has already decided to go to war. So please be careful about that. The president wants to try to resolve this diplomatically. He's going to the UN. Don't undercut the president's message. And so the fear was that if we gave that office the name Office of Northern Gulf Affairs, people would say, aha, the Pentagon has just created a new Iraq office. So we gave it a nondescript name. Anyway, the conspiracy mongers have gone crazy with it ever since. I mean, it was obviously a disaster to give it that name.
Right.
But if you want to know what that office was, all that office was a geographic office within policy, just like the offices that we had that did Latin American affairs or European affairs or East Asian affairs. And it was not an intelligence office. It was a consumer of intelligence, not a producer of intelligence. There has been so much false stuff written about that I'm happy to have yet another occasion to refute.
In consuming intelligence, as you say, about that area of the world, did the OSP did you speak to defectors and members of the Iraqi National Congress as led by Ahmad Chalabi? That's just what I read. I mean, I'll give you the chance to refute
the U.S. government, all different parts of the U.S. government, were dealing with the various Iraqi opposition groups continually.
Right.
And so we worked with people from the Iraqi National Congress, from the Iraqi National Accord, from the PUK and the KDP, the 2 main Kurdish groups. We worked with people from the Constitutional Monarchy Party, the State Department, the CIA, White House staffers, Defense Department staffers dealt on a continual basis in meetings with all various groups. So, I mean, the argument that we worked with Chalabi has become part of the mythology that argued that our office was trying to anoint Chalabi as the leader of Iraq.
Right.
I addressed this at length in my book.
I actually read that.
And it's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
What it really reflected was it was an argument that people made as part of the bureaucratic debates about what our policy should be. And people in the government made the argument that the Pentagon was trying to anoint Chalabi. It wasn't true. The more we denied it, and we did everything we could to deny it within the government and publicly, the more the conspiracy mongers said, aha, denying it just proves that you're doing it. So when you're dealing with conspiracy theorists, you can't win.
Yeah. So based on speaking to all those different groups, not just Chalabi, what was the relationship that the administration found to exist between Al-Qaeda and Saddam?
Well, again, it's not the administration. The CIA.
The CIA.
The CIA did the work on analyzing the Iraq Al-Qaeda relationship, and there were analysts at the CIA who had a theory, and that theory was that the secular Baathists of the Saddam Hussein regime would not deal with the religious extremists of Al-Qaeda. And they argued that these ideological differences essentially precluded strategic cooperation. There were a number of people around the government who were not persuaded by that argument.
Right.
And they said, there are many examples in history where ideological foes cooperate for strategic purposes. And the principal example is the Nazis and the Soviets getting together in August 1939. They were certainly ideological foes, but they were happy to divide Poland for their own practical strategic purposes. And so the notion that because Saddam and Al-Qaeda are ideological opponents, that they would not cooperate strategically against the United States did not strike us as terribly persuasive. And what we were concerned about in my office was that when the CIA was preparing analyses on the subject, the CIA was stifling its own information that showed a degree of contact and cooperation between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. And so what we were objecting to was CIA analysts shading and filtering their own information when they were presenting it to policymakers in order to support their own theory. We said that that's an improper way to deal with intelligence. And now naturally, the CIA people that we were criticizing were resentful of that and came around and said, well, all you're trying to do is, you're trying to prove your point. We weren't. We were in fact pointing out, my book discusses this and tells some specific cases where, what really got the ball rolling on this whole quarrel was a person in the policy organization called somebody at the Defense Intelligence Agency and said, why aren't you presenting this intelligence information that exists in the record when you're doing this new analysis of Iraq and Al-Qaeda? Why are you excluding this information that came from the intelligence community itself? And the person from DIA said, if we put that in the report, it would only strengthen the hand of Wolfowitz.
Right.
And that's a completely improper answer for an intelligence person to give. It's political.
Right.
And so it was. What we were trying to do was fight the politicization of intelligence by intelligence analysts, and they, of course, turned around and said we were trying to politicize the intelligence, which we weren't. And by the way, this has been a very important point here. This issue of whether we were trying to politicize the intelligence was the subject of years of investigation by two major bipartisan panels, the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Silberman-Robb Commission. Both of them